You're listening to Puma Podcast.
Welcome to The Imaginable Workplace, where we explore how we make work better. I'm Carl Javier, CEO of Puma Podcast, an award-winning podcast production company that aims to spread the joy, power, and value there is in listening.
And I'm Jackie Caniza, founder and managing partner of Haraya Coaching. Rooted in wholeness, Haraya supports individuals and teams by creating brave and safe spaces for transformation.
We asked people about their pet peeves at work, and we got literally hundreds of comments on multiple platforms. So people have feelings about this topic, and they really, really want to talk about it. And we'll get to some of those in a minute. But before we move forward, Jackie, how do you define pet peeves? And maybe you could share a few.
A few, just a few, because I think I could take
Hundreds din.
yeah. A pet peeve for me personally is like annoying little habits that you notice in coworkers that kind of get in the way of you feeling productive or in the flow of work. The first example that comes to mind when you ask me about pet peeves is a former coworker who every morning would apply lotion to her legs and feet. And and it was not.
Where is she? She's at her desk doing this?
She's at her desk in her cubicle, and we're all kind of next to each other in the cubicles. So it's not just me noticing this. This is everybody in the department. And she'll get to from her legs to her toes, in between the toes, and this was a morning ritual, and it just became a whole department cheese whiz. Yeah, it was not pleasant. Personal hygiene to me is something that you do in private.
It's personal. It's not public hygiene.
Personal, exactly. Emails of responses we got on emails as well. Copy furnishing everybody on an email that don't need to be copied. Or sending an email to someone who's sitting right next to you and you could just kind of walk over, or not even walk over, like lean back on your chair and talk to them and say what you need to say or ask what you need to ask. Like
Okay.
little things like that, I think. Do you have some, Carl?
Oh, so magbi-mix na yung my peeves and some of the listener answers. So one is the not wearing earphones. And increasingly, the more that people have gotten smartphones, like this was not that big a problem in quote unquote the old days. In the old days, may office radio, right? And wala kang choice. Kung ano yung pinapatugtog sa radyo sa office, yun na yun. And then people started to get, iPods or whatever. Obviously, I'm skipping over Walkman. Para Walkman, Discman, ibang ano yun eh. Pero yung the everyone having access to personal music is, I think, a great thing brought about by digital age, streaming, etc., etc. But then they play the music, and this was part of that. Is they play it when they could have just used their own headphones, but they've decided that everybody should hear their music. Yung additional peeve for me is that they're using the phone speaker instead of using good audio quality. So you're hearing a bad song in bad audio quality pa, and then. Pag may pinagdadaanan siya, naka-loop pa that one song that is expressing how brokenhearted they are paulit-ulit. So while I want to be sympathetic, I also can't deal with hearing a song like 10 times over and over dahil may pinagdadaanan ka. Mag-headphones ka, hoy. Pulling back. Okay. And what I'm gathering here is that these aren't necessarily harmful to relationships. And they don't necessarily, like, by definition, they're pet peeves. They're like your thing that's annoying to you. That could be totally nothing for somebody else. Like, some people, they can block out the music. They don't care. They don't even notice it. But for you, it becomes a disruption. The next one, which I really like, is jargon, business language. And so my friend Peter, he messaged and he said, I'm just annoyed by people who are using jargon. And I said, sige nga, example. So I'm going to actually read this sentence that he wrote, which is peak jargon. So he said, too much ahensya speak / jargon. especially crammed into one sentence, and he did the work of cramming it into one sentence. Here it goes. Leveraging synergistic paradigms, our innovative team is disrupting the market with cutting edge solutions that maximize ROI and optimize scalability. We'll circle back to you by COB to lock in the SOW for the deliverables based on your ask. Ang ganda! Kasi na-mix niya yung language at saka yung acronyms at saka yung buzzwords like synergistic and optimize scalability. So, and it makes the person really feel like they're trying to sound smart when it could just
Yeah.
be, we'll send it to you today. It's annoying, but it's not necessarily harmful, but it is something that it breaks your flow, I guess. Yun yung naisip ko. And then on the body horror, disgusting things,
Body horror.
someone actually posted na yung merong restaurant tapos may nagugupit ng kuko. So cutting the nails. And so I felt like cutting nails is not great at any point, but cutting nails there is even worse. But kasi yung cutting nails, like the lotion thing, may visual aspect. Um, Tapos, okay lang sana din kung yung kuko sa kamay. Pero minsan, toenail action din sila. Ganyan. Like, they do all of it, diba? So that, but again, there's the visual. So resonating with yours, Jackie. But there's also the auditory. Kasi wala namang sound yung paglagay ng lotion. Unless, well, I don't know. I could be wrong, right? But but yung clipping of the nails and then narinig mo siya sa katabing cubicle. Oh, it's a double whammy.
Yeah. Oh my goodness.
We could go on and on forever about weird things. Like it feels like I'm taking a trip down memory lane, remembering my old offices. But we also got some comments that felt like they were well beyond pet peeves. Jackie, you want to talk about some of those?
Yeah, so we got some messages that included people receiving no pay for overtime, bosses who take credit for the work of their people, bosses who don't work, and even some of the email behaviors, right? So we got this example. Someone said, emailing on a holiday, then the deadline will be the next regular working day. So obviously, this person is expected to work during the holiday. There's another one that said, pet peeve ko yung naka-leave ka, tapos ang entrada ng email, I know you are on leave, but can you please ... Those are some examples we got, and obviously these are things that are starting to cross boundaries, I think, in the workplace of people. They're not just pet peeves, I think,
Yeah.
at this point when we hear these types of examples.
Yeah, so I think meron dyan, and I'll bring up some, no? Like one that my friend MJ brought up was you want to tell someone, like you give them instructions and then they make the same mistake. And then you give them instructions again and they make the same mistake. And he was also filing that as pet peeves. And another common one that I saw was the people eating your food from the ref, which feels like tumatawid siya from just a pet peeve into theft. I don't know. That is theft, right? Like just by definition.
I would think so. Yeah.
Yung may uminom ng Coke mo or may dala kang cake tapos sinibak yung cake mo. You're really looking forward to that cake, no?
Oh my gosh. And then special pa siya, di ba? If someone gifted it to you, di ba? Oh my
Tapos may pangalan mo pa, may happy birthday, Carl. Ganyan.
Aw.
No, that did not happen to me, but it is a thing that has happened. Like people eating each other's food, magugulat ka na lang. And the thing is, like, the bigger the office, the bigger the ref, the likelier that your food will disappear. I don't know what kind of. Sorry, guys. It seems like I've been in some really weird workplaces. But what I want to point out here is that some of this is crossing over from what we would define as a pet peeve, which is just small annoyances, to actual workplace conflict like this. Like, again, if someone's been stealing your lunch, that would feel like an injustice, and that would be a legitimate reason for someone to be really, really angry. I'm joking about it now, but obviously, ganyan. But especially the ones that you mentioned, Jackie, from the comments, like being made to work overtime without pay. And then another friend of mine posted not only the overtime without pay, pero yung pag nagtrabaho ka ng OT, um, matipid sila sa pagbayad ng OT, pero pag na-late ka, ilang minutes ka lang late, whole hour yung kaltas. And I
Mm,
wonder if that's a thing, no? Na the way that we're defining pet peeve is so wide that's a
yeah.
thing for us to consider. Is the words that we've been using and the definitions for it is so broad.
Yeah, I think these those last examples you had, Carl, are very much policy related. The policy on when to take compensation out because you're late. And it is a policy. And I think the reflection there, I would encourage, management to have is what values are you inculcating by enforcing these policies. That's, I think, something that needs to be thought through very clearly. You can't say you value outcome based work when you're going to take off 5 minutes away from my salary because I'm a bit late, right? Yeah.
Yeah.
So I guess what these different there's a different range, right, that we're talking about. There are those little annoying things, and then
Yes.
there are these bigger kind of respect type of things. So the question I guess that we could ask ourselves is, how are we showing up at the workplace with respect and
Mm-hmm.
consideration for others? Because the reality is you're going into the workplace with other people. You're not in your home, working from home, which I guess a lot of people might have gotten used to in the pandemic. And so some of those habits you might be bringing with you without regard for others. And that I think is a really important thing to think about, right?
Yeah, not in your home is such an important piece for us to bring up because that does start the conversation about boundaries and appropriate behaviors at home versus outside. Now, I want to be kind to people. For a lot of
Mm.
us, it's been years since we've had to be around people. It's been years since we've had to wear pants. I haven't worn a suit. I used to have to wear a suit every day to work. I've worn a suit once in the last year for a formal dinner, and that's it. And so the rhythms and the natural behaviors of the workplace are things that we're gonna have to reconsider. Do I want to see Crocs at the workplace as a fashion rule? Probably not. But am I willing to if someone feels more comfortable? Okay. But then that's where those lines start to get drawn. Yung, but are you gonna? We've talked about this in a previous episode. Those Crocs. But are you gonna wear those Crocs to the meeting? Probably not. Magpalit ka, di ba? Um, and also I want to make space, especially for younger people entering the workplace for the first time. Some people finish college during the pandemic. They have a really hard onboard to the social situation of the office. And so people who are used to the office need to have a little bit of kindness and a little bit of graciousness, I guess, to people who are adjusting. So nandiyan din yung how are we going to be treating our office mates, I guess. Are there things that are ringing here for you, Jackie? I'm kind of trying to think of how annoying I probably was as a... Makalat ako eh. Ako yung desk na makalat, tapos maraming kung ano-anong stuff, and it's never organized. I was one of those people na sobrang kalat, but I knew where everything was. But if you looked at it, it was a mess. And it was just an annoyance for some people. And I'm also the annoying person na pag nakita ko na straight lahat ng paintings, ikukurukid ko sila ng konti just because I want to.
Oh my gosh, that would be you. And
That's me. Sorry.
I would be the person that constantly will try to keep them straight,
Mm,
right?
ayan.
No, I love what you're when you said, you know, kindness and graciousness is also necessary in the workplace, because some people just are not aware that these little habits are not appropriate or
Mm.
that they're not meant to be done in the workplace, especially if they're young and they haven't been in the workplace yet before. You have to take the context of the
Mhm.
whole situation. So in my lotion example, for
Yeah.
I think the kind thing would have been to let this person know that, this is something that people are noticing and are not liking and not seeing as appropriate, just so you know, instead of it becoming the office pantry, conversation. I think that would be the more gracious thing.
And I also want to say that that's the easier thing. Ang weird naman ni ganyan. Yuck.
Yeah. Yeah, it's easier to just talk about it, right, behind their backs, and they're the last person to know.
Yeah, so it does take a measure of office bravery, office courage to bring something up, lalo na if the person has been there longer or medyo standoffish. And I guess if they're standoffish and you talk to them, maybe good luck. And if not, I guess that's it. Diba? You're the one who adjusts, maybe. Um,
Yeah, you have to also, I guess, figure out which ones you're just willing to let slide and say, okay, this is annoying to me, but it's not gonna kill me. It's not gonna be that much of a difference. I can just ignore it.
yeah, so hindi naman mawawala yung office mate mo na broken-hearted na paulit-ulit na patugtog yung kanta na kailangan niyang mapakinggan in that moment. And the compassionate move for me is noise-canceling headphones.
Yep. Yep.
So, pwede naman tayo yung mag-adjust for certain things. The annoying emailers, those are things that can be talked to. Like, you don't have to do it this way. You can write a format for them sometimes. I found that is actually useful.
Mm.
The little, wag mo na i-BCC. I'm wondering also yung, pwede mo naman akong kausapin ng diretso, bakit? And sometimes that's also corporate culture, which maybe we start crossing into, is when someone CCs everybody. Sometimes it's I want you to be informed, but sometimes it's ooh, everyone needs to know that I'm doing this work kind of thing. So you have to figure out what the intentions are, I guess, and be more mindful of what their intent is.
Absolutely, absolutely. The intentionality of the behavior, right? We've talked about this before in other podcast episodes where there's a fine line between being yourself and authentic and being in consideration of the other person who I'm talking to or sending this email to, right?
Yeah, so I'm gonna read this like bit that we actually have from season one, episode one, about imagining a non-toxic workplace, and it's um, so the first red flag is disrespectful behavior. When people feel like there's a lack of regard for themselves, a lack of courtesy, perhaps even a lack of respect for boundaries. That would fall under that category of disrespectful behavior, and that in itself can be quite relative and a wide range. So, disrespectful is relative and wide. Each individual will have their own kind of measure of when will I feel disrespected. But definitely, if enough people are saying that in a workplace, then you want to be paying attention for sure. So, Jackie, how disrespected would you feel if I kept making the paintings crooked?
Uh, Not much, actually. I mean, it, I just won't be able to help myself and try to fix them
Yeah,
every
adjust mo na
time.
lang siya and then you move on
Yeah.
with your day.
Yeah. I used to have this rule around even my own household, right? Um, in my head, if I see something out of order, I will ask myself, okay, how much energy will it take me to just kind of
Mm.
adjust it versus making a huge deal out of it and blowing my top. There's more energy that goes into the anger and frustration than it is to just, yeah, I'm just going to hang this towel back on the rack. Right.
Mm.
So I think that's one way of looking at it. Like, how much energy will this take out of you if you get annoyed by it, or if you just simply ignore?
My example here would be the printer. Dami kong issues sa mga office printer. So, on one level, it is may nag-iwan ng naka-jam. So, nag-jam sila. Na-jam yung printer habang nagpiprint sila. Tapos iniwan na lang nila for the next person to deal with. And I'm like, and I could just unjam it. But that's really frustrating. Or
Yep.
yung iniwan na wala ng ink. Or ubos na yung
Or no,
black ink.
or no more paper.
No more paper, no more
Hindi
ink, just a
nag-refill ng
refill.
paper.
And
Yeah,
it
just
just
refill.
feels like but we feel disrespected. I don't know why.
Yeah, I think because there is a consideration for that next person who's going to use
Mm,
it, right? The paintings, okay lang because I mean it's just a painting,
nanggugulo lang.
right? But a printer that is being used by other people as well, you want
Yeah.
to consider how their experience will be when they come back, and you want them to do the same thing for you if it ran out of paper when they used it, right? So I mean, golden rule sounds cliche, but that's kind of how that works, right?
My wife and I, when we're walking down the street and hindi ka patatawirin or you're driving tas may sisingit sa'yo, ganyan. Like we shake our fist and we go, we live in a society. And feeling ko kasi yon yung may sense of injustice na
Mm,
natitrigger when there are common courtesies or what we perceive to be common courtesies that are not being followed in the
yeah.
office.
So I guess that's the second question to be asking, right? Aside from how are we showing up with consideration and respect, how are we honoring our own as well as our workmates'
Yeah.
boundaries? And I think in the examples of those overtime, the boundaries of asking someone to work over the holiday,
Oof.
that's not honoring a boundary, right? There's a
Yeah.
reason why we have these holidays and leaves for different reasons, not so that you can tell me to do more work.
Yeah, so kami, sometimes we have that holiday work. Uh, but it is planned. So
Yes.
if you know that there's a holiday coming up, but there needs to be somebody manning the stations while you're away,
Hmm.
you as a manager, you don't call somebody in during the holiday that they've already planned for. The
Yeah.
the kind thing to do and the responsible thing to do and the accountable thing to do as a manager is you plan out sino yung nakatoka and then they will get their leave at some other point. But this really moves us to another part of the conversation now, which is dividing what we are perceiving among these. I think it's escalated, no? It's gone from pet peeves to really like complaints and challenges at work. And some of it, as we said, some of it is learn to ignore. Sa'yo na lang yan, problema yan. Some of it is um, you can have an honest discussion with the person who's doing it so that maybe they realize that it's encroaching on other people's boundaries. But uh, some of these things actually need to be escalated.
Yeah.
And so I guess I want to close out with that question for you. How do we decide what can be escalated? And could you give an example of how you might do that? So my challenge here is like the ninakaw na naman yung Coke ko from the ref. And that is something that is beyond pet peeve and is something that maybe needs
Hmm.
to, like, it's happened so often that it needs to become an office policy. How do I, like, start that conversation?
Yeah, I guess if they are grievances, because these are grievances, right?
Mhm.
There, and most companies would have a grievance process and a grievance policy. It might begin with a report into HR or the
Mhm.
admin officer, and then that kind of gets escalated depending on the gravity of the grievance, right? If there is not an existing policy around that, then that might be something that management should review. But if there is a policy already, then that goes through a different process now, which is the disciplinary and code of conduct process. So I'm imagining that those things should be in place in a workplace. If it's not, then your best bet would be to go to your manager and talk to them about it. I mean, for the pantry theft there, I'm thinking as simple as a CCTV camera and
Mm.
you've got your fix. But for other things that are less obvious, you have to have an escalation process in
Yeah.
place in the workplace. Yeah, and I guess we all have pet peeves. I don't think we can really eliminate that from the workplace. At the end of the day, you have to own up to how you are showing up. How do you become more aware of yourself and your habits and how it might be impacting others? And how are you taking accountability for the behaviors that you notice that you don't feel are appropriate for the workplace? Because that, again, as we said earlier, would be the kind and gracious thing to do.
I'm Carl Javier.
And I'm Jackie Caniza. Thank you for listening to The Imaginable Workplace. This podcast is brought to you by Haraya Coaching, a company rooted in wholeness that supports individuals and teams by creating brave and safe spaces for transformation.
In partnership with Puma Podcast, an award-winning podcast production company that aims to spread the joy, power, and value there is in listening. This episode was produced by Macy Hoven and Jen Horn and edited by Joe Salcedo.
If you appreciated this podcast, then we're sure you know someone else who'd also want to improve their workplace. So please share this with a colleague or friend and do give us a rating on your podcast app. It really helps get the word out about our work. And follow the show on your podcast app for more stories, data, and insights on creating your imaginable workplace.